In this screencast, I want to show you how to prepare data in PowerPivot, where in my previous screencast I showed you how to load the data in from disparate sources. To explain what I mean, I'm going to open a standard pivot table, except this pivot table is going to be driven by the data we've already pulled in. So I can create a new worksheet and I'm ready to go. Now if I was using analysis services here or other sources of data, then I could just put in some number, for example the sales amount here. Up comes the sales amount data, and then I would go to some other dimension, say for example reseller, and pick up the reseller name, and magically I now get a report showing me how much each reseller has sold. Now I say magically because if we go back to PowerPivot, each of these bits of data are disparate and on separate sheets. So how did PowerPivot know to join those two together? Because I've got my facts here, my sales amount is on this tab, and I've got my reseller on this tab. And the clue is that you can see this icon up here, is that PowerPivot knew to join those two together because they came from the same source of data and it understood the relationship between them from that source. In other words, there was a primary and foreign key relationship in SQL Server terms between those two tables. And actually we can manage those relationships in PowerPivot directly. If I go to the table tab here and manage relationships, you can see that by inference PowerPivot has already worked out how to relate all of these together. But it's missed one, and that's because I pulled one set of data in from Azure. So what I need to do is I actually need to create a new relationship in here, and I do that just by hitting the create button. So I'm going to relate my fact all sales and the product key in there to my Azure table, which is called dim product, on product key. And so now if I dragged all the products on there, then I'd be able to also pivot on those properly. So that's one aspect of preparing the data, making sure all these tabs are properly related between each other. The other thing I might want to do is, for example, on a given column here in product category, I might want to change the name of that category. So I might want to just simply rename it to just be product category, so that when it's presented to other people using this, they see a meaningful name. I can also elect to hide columns, and if I look at the columns here, a lot of these we're not going to use on the pivot table because they're simply a way of joining this tab to the other tabs I've got in my PowerPivot. So I can then simply elect to hide columns from the pivot table, so we won't see them, we won't get unnecessary clutter when we're actually analysing the data in the next step of this process. Other things that we might want to do would be to format these columns, and we've got the familiar tabs at the top here, so I might go for accounting, for example, just to 2 decimal places with commas in the way. So we can format the data as well before we start to consume it. There may also be additional measures that we want to include in our analysis that we can't get from our source data, and they might be derived from the data that we've already got. And we can put in formulas in here, but they're not the usual Excel formulas because you only have to put the formula in on the column and it works it all the way down through the rest of the table. So it's a bit more like MDX, and this expression language that's in PowerPivot is known as Data Analysis Expressions, or DAX for short. Now in this fact table I've got a whole load of information about my reseller sales, and you can see the sales channel set to reseller here. What I'm interested in is actually how profitable my resellers are, because that might help me influence on future campaigns and decisions to help the strong or do something different for the ones that aren't performing so well. So I want to work out how much profit they're making. Now in my product dimension here, I know what the list price is for the bike or component here, and so what I can do is I can use that on my calculation I want to put in here. And the way that I do that is I put in equals just like I might do in an Excel formula. And then I want to go and get some related information. And so I use the related function. And now I can go to my dim product, get the list price from here, and you can see it's automatically put it up. Multiply that by the number of units that I've sold, which is the order quantity. Put some brackets around that. And subtract the sales amount, which is, in other words, how much we got paid to sell this to that particular reseller. And that's it, and I'm done. And when I go over to my column now, that calculation is automatically rippled all the way down through here. And it's not the same number. I need to go down a bit further, and you can see that where the amounts are different and so on, it's recorded that. So that's how we can calculate additional measures. And I just finally just now need to go to my column and rename that as reseller profit. The final thing I want to have a look at is in the table option here. You can see at the top here that we've got a whole bunch of information about the table where I got this information from, and I can edit it here. Now the reason you might want to do this is to be able to refresh the data at a later date, or indeed to modify it having had a look at it in PowerPivot. So that's preparing data in PowerPivot, and I've put some resources up here so that you can start doing this for yourselves.